#1 multicultural channel. This is Tag TV.
Hello viewers, welcome to Newsweek South Asia, a program that talks about breeding of terrorism and its impact on South Asian nations. Let's begin with the headlines first. Islamic State targets Sikh minority in Kabul. Pakistan fails to exit FATF Graylist. And targeted killings posing new challenge for security forces in Kashmir. Let's start the show with Afghanistan, where the spate of bad headlines has not ended since the Taliban took over Kabul last year. The end of the last week was more of the same. Islamic State targeted Karte Parwan Gurudwara in Kabul on 18th June. And this once again rigged up the issue of security for minorities under the Taliban regime. 2 people, including a Sikh, were killed and several injured in the terror attack. Take a look.
A peaceful morning of prayers at a Sikh temple in Kabul soon turned into this. 2 Islamic State terrorists targeted Karte Parwan Gurudwara with grenades on 18th June morning, trapping several worshippers inside. Outside the Gurudwara, a car laden with explosives was detonated. One visitor along with a guard stationed outside the Gurudwara was killed in the attack, while some Taliban members were also injured. A witness from the local Sikh community said there were around 30 people in the Gurudwara when the attack took place. Hours later, while taking responsibility for the attack, Islamic State claimed that their suicide bombers carried out the explosion. In a statement posted online, Islamic State said the attack targeted Hindus and Sikhs and their apostates who protected them. While the minority Sikh community is heartbroken by the successive attacks on them, Taliban officials say things could have been much worse as Islamic State's main terror operation was foiled.
ما صبح وقتی 6:15 بود میرفتیم سنوکار 6:15 بود که یک انفجار قوی شد. بعد از انفجار فایر شروع شد و جنگ بود دوام داشت. باز نیروهای امنیتی خود رساندن فایر بعد از که نیروهای امنیتی رساندن داخل دو انفجار بسیار قوی شد. بعد از انفجار یا جنگ دوام داشت فعلا پیش آمده بودن. جنگ کمی پیشتون درازی در امسال آمده بودن. یک انفجار قوی دین میشد. بعد از نیروهای امنیتی زیادترشان آمدن ساحه را تحت کنترل خود کردن. باز کسی نزدیک فعلا نمیبون که کسی چیز را ببینه یا دیگه فعلا مگر کدام انفجارها را که ما دیدیم انفجارهای بسیار قوی بود. اول انفجارش محترم بود تا که ما اون شنیدیم 4 طرف گپ میزدن. اول انفجارش محترم بود. باز جزئیاتش دیگه بار ما را نزدیک نمیبون.
This is the third assault on Sikh since 2018. Their numbers have dwindled to just a couple of hundred from 500,000 in the 1970s. As of March 2020, there were around 650 to 700 Afghan Sikhs and Hindus in Afghanistan. However, since the attack on Gurudwara Har Rai Sahib in Kabul on March 25 that year, when 25 Afghan Sikhs were killed, most members of the community have been evacuating to India in batches. After the Taliban took over Kabul in August last year, 3 batches of Afghan Sikhs had arrived in Delhi, including former Sikh MPs Narinder Singh Khalsa and Anarkali Kaur Honoryar. Around 160 Afghan Sikhs and Hindus are still stranded in Afghanistan and they are willing to resettle in India.
The latest attack on the Gurudwara is kind of emblematic of where Afghanistan is at the moment. That there really is no security even after the so-called end of the war. And you're seeing a pattern which is really no different from when the war was continuing. And obviously, as always, as during the war as well, it specifically targets minorities. Now, does that mean anything has actually changed? Well, the answer is yes. The answer is that what is happening, we're seeing now, is that the Haqqani network is slowly turning against Pakistan. Who orders these attacks? Pakistan. They don't happen without Pakistan's blessings. Who's in power? The Haqqani network, who's Pakistan's best friend. So, in this particular case, what we need to understand is that Pakistan and the Haqqani network are growing apart, and that is something which is definitely worth watching.
The war-torn country has witnessed a series of terror attacks staged by the Islamic State group in the last few weeks. Not only Afghan Sikhs and Hindus, but Islamic State also has been targeting Muslim Shiites and Sufis. The Taliban say they have secured the country since taking power in August and largely eliminated the Islamic State's local offshoot. But international officials say the risk of a resurgence in terrorism remains. On one hand, Afghanistan faces an endless threat of terrorism. On the other hand, the country finds itself gripped by the severe restrictions imposed by the Taliban. People in Afghanistan had dreamed of peace and an end to conflicts to improve their situation, but not at the cost of losing the last 20 years of achievements. It seems that the forever war in Afghanistan is nowhere near its end.
At United Nations Security Council, India warned of Afghanistan becoming a safe haven for terrorist organizations that threaten the region and called for unified action against the terrorist groups getting entrenched there. India's permanent representative to UN, T.S. Tirumurti, said that the Taliban, which now controls Afghanistan, is yet to dissociate itself from other terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda, which continue to remain active. Take a look. In the several months since the return to power of the Taliban in Afghanistan, the world's attention may have already shifted to other global developments. But for India, Afghanistan's situation remains a major issue. A major concern for India is the presence of the transnational terrorist groups such as the Islamic State in the Khorasan province and the Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent. Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent has already hailed the US withdrawal from Afghanistan as a victory. And it is already clear that the Taliban has not gone beyond paying lip service to ousting the Al-Qaeda, and there is concern that the latter will only grow in strength in the coming days. There is also fear that the individuals interested in joining either the Islamic State or other jihadist groups will move to Afghanistan. Recently, India at UN raised serious concerns about the continued presence of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and increase in recruitment to the Islamic State Khorasan.
There is a significant increase in the presence of ISIL-K in the country and their capacity to carry out attacks. ISIL-K, with its base reportedly in Afghanistan, continues to issue threats of terrorist attacks on other countries. The report further noted that the Taliban is yet to dissociate itself with other terrorist groups such as the Al-Qaeda, which continue to remain active. The linkages between groups listed by the UN Security Council, such as the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, as well as provocative statements made by other terrorist groups operating out of Afghanistan, pose a direct threat to the region.
Just a few days back, a report of the UN Secretary General had claimed that the terror groups enjoy greater freedom in Afghanistan than at any time in recent history. And there are no signs that the Taliban leadership has taken steps to limit the activities of foreign terrorists in the war-torn country. According to the report, ISIS-K is taking advantage of the turmoil in the country, including by recruiting fighters from the Eastern Turkestan Islamic Movement and the Turkestan Islamic Party, among other foreign terrorist groups. It aims to position itself as the chief rejectionist force in Afghanistan and to expand into neighboring Central and South Asian countries. The UN member states are concerned that if Afghanistan descends into further chaos, some Afghan and foreign violent extremists may shift to ISIS. India has hence stressed on the need to see concrete progress in ensuring that UN proscribed terrorists and entities do not get any kind of support either from Afghan soil or from sanctuaries based in the region. India at UN raised concern over an increase in attacks on minority groups in the country, including the Hazara, Hindu and Sikh communities. Recently, ISIS-K claimed responsibility for the attack on the Gurudwara Karte Parwa in Kabul and has threatened to strike elsewhere.
India is closely monitoring the security situation in Afghanistan and is actively engaging with the international community to ensure consensus on the issues of security, peace and stability. We strongly condemn the terrorist attack on Gurudwara Dashmesh Pita Sahib Ji in Kabul on 18th of June. The terrorist assault on places of worship of minority communities and targeting of innocent civilian population continues to be a serious concern. The recent findings of the 1988 Sanctions Committee's Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team report indicate that the current authorities need to take much stronger action to fulfill their anti-terrorism commitment.
As a contiguous neighbor and long-standing partner of Afghanistan, India has direct stakes in ensuring the return of peace and stability in the war-torn country. India has called for an inclusive dispensation in Afghanistan, which represents all sections of Afghan society, especially women. A broad-based, inclusive and representative formation is necessary for both domestic and international engagement. Moving on. Amidst the ongoing economic and political crisis in the country, Pakistan faces yet another setback, this time by Financial Action Task Force. As recently, FATF announced that Pakistan will continue to remain on its grey list. It declared that the country will be removed from the grey list only if it successfully passes an on-site visit where the terror financing watchdog will assess if it can sustain its reforms on terror financing and money laundering. A report.
Pakistan intensified lobbying, but all efforts went in vain. Islamabad could not exit the grey list of FATF despite its eye-washing measures to counter terror financing. Recently, in a plenary meeting held in Berlin, FATF decided to retain Pakistan on its grey list. The country could only be removed from the grey list of FATF after an on-site visit to verify the implementation of its reforms, but it is unlikely to happen. The country has been on the grey list since 2018. The multilateral watchdog had put Pakistan on its list of jurisdictions under increased monitoring in 2018 for not doing enough to curb the financial activities of terror groups. Since then, Pakistan's performance has been under periodic review, but every time it is found to be deficient in its efforts.
Look, terrorism has always been used by certain powers as a strategic tool to further their interests. And what I notice and what I observe, that Chinese are going all out to see that Pakistan exits this list. There are a number of Western countries too who are trying to support Pakistan. I feel the kind of evidences global body had and international community had, Pakistan should have been blacklisted long back, but still that did not happen. Even in Asia Pacific group, there were certain countries who were trying to openly support Pakistan, but that is the reason that Pakistan could not be blacklisted.
There is a simple reason for Pakistan being on the grey list, that Pakistan's deep state, led by the ISI and the army, is at the forefront of carrying out illegal terrorist activities and promoting terror globally. According to the Congressional Report on Terrorism, which was published in 2021, Pakistan is home to 12 foreign terrorist organizations, including 5 of them being India-centric like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. This report states that US officials have identified Pakistan as a base of operations for numerous armed and non-state terrorist groups, some of which have existed since the 1980s. Last year, a New York-based artificial intelligence Castellum startup had revealed that Pakistan has silently removed the names of almost 4,000 terrorists from its terror watch list. Pakistan's Countering the Financing of Terrorism lead, the National Counter-Terrorism Authority, did not provide any explanation for the removal of the names. The removed name includes Lashkar-e-Taiba leader and Mumbai terror attack mastermind Zakir Rahman Lakhvi and many others.
It's just not possible for Pakistan to exist without its terror infrastructure. Because Pakistani political establishment, especially its deep state, it thrives on the basis of terrorism. It's Pakistan's deep penetration and I would say the kind of interface they enjoy. That's what has made Pakistani deep state relevant for all the major international powers. And good number of Western countries and others depend upon Pakistan for their counter-terror strategies, and Pakistan pretends as if it's helping them. But its sole claim to fame, or rather its entire ability to help in counter-terror strategy, stems from the kind of interface, the kind of linkages it enjoys with those terror groups. And the financing part of it you are talking about, I have always maintained organized crime and terrorism are interlinked.
Pakistan's list of actionable points shared with FATF is a smokescreen to show its commitment to combating terror, while the reality is that the country remains a safe haven for terrorists and terror financing activities. The biggest example is that convictions have not happened in the 26/11 terror attack case in Pakistan, and Sajid Mir, one of the chief perpetrators of the crime, is still roaming freely in the country. No action has also been taken against Talha Saeed, son of 26/11 mastermind Hafiz Saeed, who is the new face of Jamaat-e-Dawa. According to intelligence agencies, Talha is next in line to take over functions of JUD, the parent body of the globally proscribed terror outfit Lashkar-e-Taiba. Despite mounting proof of Pakistan's role in international terrorism sponsorship, the country has taken no significant counter-terrorism measures on its turf. In truth, Islamabad has taken cosmetic measures prior to each plenary session of the global watchdog FATF, which has kept Pakistan on its grey list for failing to curb money laundering and terror financing. Superficial steps are taken to get off the grey list of FATF, while the country remains a hotbed of terrorism in reality.
Terrorists in Kashmir have received instructions from Pakistan to take on soft targets in the valley, including minorities, civilians, off-duty policemen, panchayat members and pro-Indian people to create fear and paranoia. Though security forces are on their toes and have busted dozens of modules of hybrid terrorists, it's a new challenge for them to break the cycle of continuous killings. A report. As India continues to fight terrorism at the Jammu and Kashmir borders, a total of 118 terrorists have been gunned down in the Kashmir Valley this year. Jammu and Kashmir police have revealed this report, and it is further learned that out of 118, as many as 32 foreign terrorists have been killed. Last year in 2021, a total of 55 terrorists were killed in the same period. With the crackdown on separatists, the recent sentencing of Yasin Malik and the centre's move to restore land of Kashmiri Pandits, there is a pressure on terrorists to make their presence felt in the form of fear. That is why Pak-backed terrorists are escalating terror-related violence in Kashmir. This has been happening in the last 3 to 4 weeks, and it is coinciding with the situation in Pakistan. The economy is in doldrums, inflation is at its peak, the army is being openly questioned. These instances have never happened in Pakistan. So, a diversion is created by engineering attacks in Kashmir. Following the incidents of targeted killings in Kashmir, further threatening the minority community, the security forces are on the alert to neutralize any violent situation. Pakistan has been sending consignments of pistols every single day from across the international border. Although several consignments have been seized, some have made it into the hands of hybrid terrorists who are unleashing terror.
They are vulnerable section. They need protection. They have got to be protected. Government has taken various measures in the past. Probably much more has to be done, and that is being done. We have got to see that wherever they are and whatever protection they require, because they can be the soft targets, and no government will be able to give an individual protection to each individual in any village or far off places. So we have to find out the systems, and best thing is that we go on the offensive against the terrorists and try to see that these persons who possibly can threaten their lives or their properties and others, they are accounted for.
The underlying factors of Pakistan's Kashmir policy have remained unchanged since the first Kashmir war. Its diplomatic efforts, both bilaterally as well as raising the issue at various international forums, have been limited to malign India and to portray that bilateral approach to bring peace between the two countries have failed. Islamabad must end material support for terrorism in Kashmir if regional peace is to be assured.
We have to protect our interests. We will decide when and with whom and on what terms we will have peace. When our core interests are involved, there is no question of peace at any cost. There has got to be a peace. We want very good relations with our neighbors, Pakistan included. We would like to have good relations with them. We would like to have very normal relations with them. But certainly the tolerance threshold for terrorism is very low. We certainly would not like to make our citizens as sitting ducks for the terrorists who come and do this thing.
Good ties with Pakistan is possible only when terrorism is stopped. It is in the interest of Pakistan to remove hurdles to the normalization process. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We will be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra signing off on the behalf of the entire production team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.